Hello everyone. Today we're covering special right triangles, also known as 30, 60, 90 degree triangles. These are really special and kind of easy to work with because all of the triangles are similar in the way that the sides are proportional. So if you can calculate one of the sides and it's a 36, 90 triangle, that means that you can find all of the other sides without knowing any of the special properties or any of the other lanes. So first thing we're going to have to do is figure out what our smallest, our largest, and our middle side is, back from our basic triangle properties video. Well, we know the 30 degrees is the smallest angle inside of our triangle, so this right here is going to be our short leg. The legs are the two sides of the triangle, and the hypotenuse is the big one. So now we need to figure out our hypotenuse. So our hypotenuse is going to be the biggest one. Well, hypotenuse is across from our 90 degree angle. So we will call this hypotenuse. 90 is our largest degree. So our hypotenuse is opposite the 90 degree angle. And then lastly, we're going to find our middle angle, or we also call that the long leg. It's going to be opposite the 60 degree. So we're going to do long leg right here. Now the cool little proportions between going from the short leg to the hypotenuse or the long leg is the short leg we're going to always assign to be our one side. So we're going to just randomly assign the short side to be a 1. Now this could be a different proportion, so it could be all of them multiplied by 2 if the short side is 2, but we're going to start with something simple as 1. So now to get from our short leg to our long leg, we're going to multiply by something. So in these examples, we're always going to have the long leg is going to be a factor of the square root of 3 larger, or the short leg is a factor of the square root of 3 smaller than the long leg. The easiest one is our hypotenuse. When we go from our short leg to our hypotenuse, we're just going to simply double it, or we're going to cut it in half if we're going from a hypotenuse to the short leg. So if our short leg is 1, that makes our hypotenuse 2. We multiply by 2, and that makes our long leg the square root of 3. So we have to remember that if we're going from a smaller side, so from the short leg to get to a bigger side, such as the hypotenuse, what do? Do we multiply or divide? When we went from 1 to 2, we multiplied to get to 2. So from smaller to bigger, we're going to multiply. But what if we were going from the hypotenuse of 2 trying to get to 1? What do we need to do? Do we need to multiply by 2 or divide by 2? We're going to be dividing to get smaller. So if we're getting from bigger to smaller, we're going to divide. Now remember, the very first thing we want to do is figure out which one is our smallest side and assign that our base. So if that base happens to be 3, we're going to do 3 times 2 to get 6 for our hypotenuse. 3 times the square root of 3 to get our long leg. Pretty straightforward. Let's do some examples. So the first thing we need to do in each of these triangles in order to solve them is to figure out which side is our smallest side. So whenever we have this little square in the corner of our triangle, that means that that's our 90 degree side. Well, we're given our 60 degree side, so this one has to be our 30 degree side. So we know this right here is our shortest leg. So to get from our shortest leg to get to our long leg, which is opposite of the 60, we're going to simply do 10 and multiply it by the square root of 3 because we're going from smaller to bigger. Now, if we're going from our shortest side of 10 and we're trying to get to our hypotenuse, which is the longest side of the whole triangle, opposite the 90 degrees, we're going to simply just multiply it by 2. So we're going to do 10 times 2, which is going to give us 20. Pretty straightforward. We've solved all of them for this example. Now let's do the same thing for this one. First thing we need to do is identify our shortest leg. So this is our shortest leg. So to get from our shortest leg to our longest leg, opposite the 60 degrees, we're going to multiply 15 times the square root of 3. Now the next thing we're going to do is go from our shortest side, the 15, and get to a hypotenuse. We're just simply going to do 15 times 2. That gives us a longest hypotenuse of 30. Now we're going to do the same thing here, but it's a little bit different. So we're given 30, So that means this is our shortest side. We don't know what our shortest side is. This right here is our middle, right here. We have 60 degrees. This is our middle side, so we have 25. So now we're going to have to go backwards. So how do we get from 25 back to our shortest side? Well, if we're going from bigger to smaller, instead of multiplying, now we're going to divide. So we're going to take 25 and we're going to divide it by the square root of 3, the same factor that we had before. Now, how do we get from this small side, 25 divided by the square root of 3? We can get to our hypotenuse by simply multiplying it by 2. 25 times 2 divided by the square root of 3, or 50 divided by the square root of 3 would be our answer. Now let's move on to a couple more examples. So in this example, we're going to try to identify our shortest side. This is 60. This right here is our 30-degree side. So if this is our smallest side, how do we get from the middle side to the smallest? We're going to do 30 divided by the square root of 3. And then how do we get from our smallest side to our hypotenuse? We're going to multiply that by 2. So it'll be 30 times 2 divided by the square root of 3, and we're done. Or 60 divided by the square root of 3. Now we're going to do the same thing with this one. Where's our smallest side? Well, this is our smallest side, but we don't know it. This one right over here is our long leg, so it's 60 degrees. 100, if we go from our long leg and we're trying to get back to our small leg, we're going to do 100 divided by the square root of 3. And then to get from the short leg to our hypotenuse, we're just going to simply do 100 times 2 divided by the square root of 3. We're multiplying by 2 to get across there. Same thing in this example. First thing we're going to do is we're going to identify where our 30 degrees is. This is our smallest side. Well, we don't know it yet. But do we know our long leg? We don't know that either. So if we don't have our long leg or our short leg, all we have is our hypotenuse. It's opposite of this 90-degree angle. Well, to get from the hypotenuse back to our small leg, remember before we multiplied by 2, so now we're going to do 8 divided by 2, or 4, is the length of our small. And then to get from the small leg to our long leg, we're going to do 4 times the square root of 3, and we're done. Let's move on to our last two examples. So this triangle we have on the left here doesn't look like all the rest of our triangles. We don't have just one right triangle. We have one equilateral triangle. How do we know it's an equilateral triangle? Well, if this is 60 degrees, this is 60 degrees, how do we figure out what goes here? Remember, if we have 180 degrees total, and we're going to subtract 60 minus 60, and we have a leftover 60 degrees. So we know that all three sides are the same, all three angles are the same. We're going to cut this down the middle, and if this is 60 degrees, what does this angle right here have to be? What's 60 divided by 2? We have a 30, 60, 90-degree triangle. Now we can solve this just like we did before. We don't know what this side is, but we do know what our long leg side is. The side opposite of our 60 is a 50. So right now, all we're looking at is this one triangle on this side right here. We don't need the whole triangle right now. We just need half of it. All right, now how do we get from that 50 back to our small one? Well, remember, we had the square root of 3. We're going to do 50 divided by the square root of 3. All right, so now how are we going to get from that to our hypotenuse over here? So from the small side to our hypotenuse, we're just going to simply multiply by 2. 50 times 2 divided by the square root of 3. So we have 100 divided by the square root of 3 is the length of one of these sides. Well, in this example, we need to know all of the sides. If this side is 50 times 2 divided by the square root of 3, and these angles are all the same, what is the length from here to here? Is it not just 50 times 2 divided by the square root of 3, or 100 over the square root of 3? And the same thing here. From here to here, we also have 100 divided by the square root of 3. All right, now let's move on to our very last example. We first identify we have a 30 degrees. We don't know what our shortest side is. This is our 90, so we do have our hypotenuse. So we're going to come right here. To get from our hypotenuse back to our short side, we're going to divide by 2. We're going from bigger to smaller, so we're going to divide. So we get 20 as our short side. And then to get from our short side to our long leg, we're going to multiply that 20 times the square root of 3, and we are done.